So today's session is on how to take your research or a research publication and use it as the basis for a grant proposal. And if you joined Dr. Ahmad last fall, he talked about working with students from graduate courses and helping them turn their research into co-authored publications. And now we're moving to the next step, getting funding to expand that research. So I am going to share my screen and turn it over to Dr. Anwar Ahmad. Dr. Ahmad, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pazita, and good morning to everybody. Uh, I would like to share some of my experience and try to cover this talk. I've been giving a lot of thought and trying to cover this talk from various angles. Um, of course, I also try to understand the interaction between now the available AI resources and how would you incorporate that with your own experience? And I'll try to share some of notes on that one too. So let's try to understand the entire process from its taking a holistic approach. Writing a proposal, I'll let you understand or help me clarify myself how I try to achieve a little bit of success at Jackson State University during last 15 to 18 years. First of all, we need to build maybe our own portfolio on the research. And given the fact over here that most of the time we are engaged in undergrad teaching, uh, most of us may not have the opportunity or exposure towards the grad students or have the ability to attract them given the funding resources or given the non-availability of a student pool. So what I try to do over the years to use my grad courses as a basis to develop research. So most of research paper which I published, many, not all of them, but many of them were with the help of those students who were in my grad class, not as my graduate student. Although I had a one or two very good example, and one of that example, she's an associate professor over here now, that I published several papers with her. So this presentation will take you through sharing my experience from those publication perspective and how could you use those paper then to build research proposal and then looking at a proposal from a total perspective, not just developing the proposal per se, which is a daunting task in its own right, but then how you be able to look at from other angle and find a way to get it funded. And then most importantly, if you're lucky to get it funding or get it funded, how would you successfully complete it? So let me take you through very quickly, Dr. And one of the thing is I question always myself the motivation. If you are in the beginning of your career path, of course, you have several challenges, and then getting your promotion, getting your tenure will keep you on track. But let's say once you have already passed through that, then you have a competing challenges, making sure that you're teaching courses, and if you're teaching undergrad courses, that takes a lot of your time. And then I'm not sure about you, advising undergrad students also take a lot of your effort. And then if you have a shortage in your faculty, you end up teaching more than two classes. So now you have classes, you have teaching, you have advisement, you have grants, and you have service part. And one of experience, for example, a few years ago, we were trying to recruit new faculty and new chair. Believe it or not, the entire years went on just on the on the search process. So managing your time and then managing your resources and then putting into towards what you need requires a lot of motivation. So your question many times keep coming after getting repeated rejection after rejection after rejection. How would you maintain yourself? How would you maintain your sanity? How you keep yourself motivated? So I'm not sure. Just help me understand. If you could find a better answer to that, I will be glad. But one of the things I find is that do not get or let any lapses or any time gap in between your publication process. Once you are on track, once you have a basic manuscript developed, try to get it published as quickly as possible. And if you have students involved, one of the best thing or best approach I found is that invite them to your office and set aside certain time frame. So have them sit with you. That will not only force them but forces you, and you go them section by section. I find that although maybe time consuming, but it forces you to go through that process as quickly as possible and have that paper in a very timely manner. Then sometime also these days, publishing a paper requires a lot of money. And most often many journals are asking you two to $3,000. So have that funding available either through grant or through your department chair, or through university, whatever the funding mechanism you're looking to have that paper published, have that in mind from the get-go so that you do not have that bottleneck at the end. So I find these some small kind of a gapping mechanism, not to have the time lapse, not to have some bottlenecks in your process, and then let it go through as quickly as possible. And once you get the review back, then go over as quickly as possible too. Sometime it pushes you down, but then have that review process addressed as quickly as possible. So I have given that thought on that process based upon what I have gone through over the years, that take the gap out of your process, because if you delay that part, it's gonna delay you further and reduce your motivation. So I have everything in place so that once you have that manuscript developed, it should see the end of the process. Could I have next slide, please? So that's the time frame I use. Sit with them, special attention to where we have a lot of resources available that also give us more challenges. Look into when you get your paper from the students, the matching score using any software or whatever the mechanism you have available, and then make sure that you do not have any doubt on that part. Then look into whatever they're trying to achieve. Do you have any ambiguity in your objective and the mechanism to achieve that objectivity? And then I'll come back at the last part in much more detail from the review perspective. I'll go in more detail in just a second. Dr. Fazira, could I have next slide, please? Okay, now once you have your portfolio built, once I started about 18 years ago at Jackson State University, the position I came on, that was a NIH funded, and it was a phase out position. In the beginning, they gave us 100%, and then slowly the university took over. And the mandate was to have an in-house biostatistician so that it could provide the necessary a foundational and then background, a kind of support needed to develop new project, to have data analysis, and to have the interpretation of results, and help, of course, in publication. So I built my career on that part. So slowly we kept on going, and we kept on receiving RCMI funding, and we were very lucky that we are now in fifth or sixth cycle, although this time we are struggling a little bit, but we were lucky that we have a continuity in that process. So I built upon my career path on those quantitative methodologies. And over the years, once I built enough foundation in terms of publication, and once we start receiving or looking into a different funding mechanism, at that time, we were lucky enough to have a collaborative research program between United States and Pakistan. And there was about a $500,000 funding available. And we were lucky enough, based upon whatever we achieved over here through RCMI, that we wrote a project and we got funded. So again, building upon your foundation where your strengths are, that helps you tremendously, and that in turn were built on my publication process. So now let's look into the overall funding. No, no, please go back, Dr. Fazira. Okay, look into this overall process. Look into where your funding or where the funding may be available. and look into where if your objectives matches that funding requirements. Okay, then come the developing proposal itself. It used to be one of the hardest part, but now it has become relatively easier because of so much resources available, from literature review to grammatic review, to AI based understanding. So that part is not as difficult as it used to be 30 years ago. But also keep in mind that it's only one aspect out of many other aspects. And then to look into what may be the selection criteria, what may be some of the fundamental basics which are required to get your proposal funded. And in that, I was talking to Dr. Pazita, and also I gave in my own presentation. If you could, if there's a possibility that you become a part of a review panel or review process, please do that. I have been part of several, but recently I was taking part in two distinct panels, one through CDC and one for the RCMI NIH proposal. And that give you a lot of understanding how that process works. And believe it or not, it in the end it's a human psyche which will help you to get through that process. And for example, one of the issue in your proposal is developing a package which is attractive. You have only 10 to 12 pages, and converting your idea, a tangible idea which could achieve your objective, and bringing into a 10 to 12 page black and white, it's a daunting task. But at the same time, also understand that those who are reviewing it also human being. They have their own time constraint, and they are looking into a product which is understandable. And if you look into the review process in itself, the minute you open your proposal, they are trying to understand in as quickly, in as time efficient manner as possible. And imagine in your proposal, if you are not clear enough, if you do not have given me an understanding which is easily relatable to your objective and how well you're going to achieve those objectives, that's where most of the time reviewer struggle to give you a good point or give you a high score. And that's what we learned over the years, that once your proposal is being reviewed, you have to avoid giving those kind of gaps to the reviewer where they could find a reason not to score you high. So you have to find in a way a kind of a champion in your proposal so that one person could take it and build upon it rather than take it and not build upon it. That's what the one of the basic lesson I learned when I participated in several of those review panels or review processes. And finally, if you are good enough and you have been funded, which occasionally I got funded, then taking it through the internal post award management is a task in its own self. It's a challenge in its own self. If I'm not sure how many of you have gone through that. If you think it takes 2 months, start 4 months earlier, because there's a long trail of signature, long trail of process work which takes you for your either travel award, travel arrangement, even if you want to have your student compensation take place. It takes a lot of time. So in order to understand, not only to have it funded, but you also have to become a kind of an efficient manager. So please take into a holistic approach of your research activity. It's although most of the time we are struggling at the proposal side, but it's more than that. Could I have next slide, please? Okay, so the review experience, I strongly suggest that have other colleagues give your name. Most of the time, they look into the databases. For example, if you're a part of RCMI program, we have a network of RCMI consortium where all those HBCUs where that award is being given, we are a part of that consortium, and we have a huge database. So those databases usually are used for outside funding, for consultation or for any such help. So become a part of those consortiums so that your name could be out there and you will be, or at least have an option to be given the opportunity to be a part of such process. So at least do that. As I mentioned, during last few months, I've been a part of CDC and also RCMI, where we have 3 to 5 reviewers. So what happens initially, they send you proposal and you have a little bit of time to go over that. So you go through in detail, try to review, and then give your score, and then you sit in a review panel, which is a very intensive one, and that's where you have only 15 to 20 minutes to go through across all proposal. So it comes to what we have learned over the years, that those proposal which have a clarity, which is not too ambitious. Most of the time, especially those faculty who are young, ambitious, and energetic, and when they write their proposal, they try to accomplish a lot during a little bit of time frame. And that's where the things get muddled a little bit. So most of the time, what reviewers are looking is the clarity of idea, is the clarity of the link between your objective and your specific aims, how good you are in proposing a methodology which could help you achieve those objectives. And you have to be very careful. For example, when we were reviewing one of the proposal, a person proposed a methodology which was way out of the limit of that objectives. And I happened to be working in those quantitative risk assessment study for a long period of time. And from my own experience, I knew that it could have worked better had he known that methodology. So when I put those things in forward, I mean, put those things in perspective and try to give my understanding. So it is critical for you as a writer that you have a good understanding which methodology will help you achieve your objective. It's not advisable to reinvent your wheel, so to speak, because if something already is there, you can build upon that by going in an incremental manner rather than proposing a totally new which you have not gone through before. So these are some of very subtle observation which will only come to you if you become a part of that process. So if you get chance, please go through that, and that will tremendously help you in understanding. Sometimes it's very discouraging that when you look into a proposal, it takes months of efforts. And when you are given an exposure, you have only few minutes of that attention from reviewer perspective. So you got to be extremely careful to understand this entire process. Although you've been working on it, but if you do not understand the other angle of that perspective, you will be relatively at disadvantage. Could I have next slide, please? Okay, which one? I think one step back, Dr. Puzita. One slide back, I guess. Okay. No, no, that's fine. Please go next. Okay. I think we have covered that. Okay. So I think I have gone through most of this already. Not only should your proposal be adequately developed, addressing the funding agency objective, it should also be very clear. It should also be meticulous and well explained. If you look into the packaging part, a good example sometimes we gives the Apple iPhone packaging. If you look into that packaging, it sometimes it's more attractive than the product in itself. And somebody asked Steve Jobs once why you are spending so much on packaging when people would never use it. And he said, I want to have that feeling. I want to have that user feeling when they look at it, that wow experience. So let's say if you could translate that wow experience in our proposal. You have only 8 to 12 pages and you have only few minutes. When a reviewer open your proposal, he needs to look at it and then find something to base his or her decision on that. If you have some good points in the opening pages, he will use it as an example. And if you have one or two really bad points in your opening pages, he will use it as a rejection point. So make sure that once you have your proposal, especially in your abstract or in your summary or in your introduction, you have a clarity of yourself. you have a clarity of mind. And one of the thing which I found over the years, that especially the young faculty, they get overambitious. They try to achieve too much within that time frame. So please have a guard against that. So must be meticulous, must be well explained, must be well organized. Reviewers, like I mentioned over and over, needs clarity and unambiguity. If you look into when we sit into those panels, most of the time they ask question, what does that mean? Where, how would you achieve that? How would you propagate? So most of the time it's the explanation. It's the explanation of your thought. So, although you may know more than I do, but you need to tell me because I may not be aware of your process or thought process or your experience. So, help me understand what you try to achieve. Okay. So, like I mentioned, it should be well organized, it should be well written, and it should be as clear as possible. Could I have next slide, please? Okay. The Now it's these are some of the simple step-by-step manner understanding of that process, especially for the proposal. Your proposal must be aligned with your objective. It's easier, I'm sure you can always ask me, I know what I'm doing. What do you mean by that? What I mean by that, that it should also reflect that what you are proposing is not only achievable, but how is it achievable? You have to convince me. So your proposal must be aligned with your objectives and carry them through specific aim, methodology, delivery, and dissemination. Everything is well knitted together. So again, and one should not be a bottleneck to the other. For example, all these processes should be standalone. If you miss one, if you are not going well, it should not stop the other one too. Your specific aim must be standalone, clear and achievable. And do not give four, five, or six specific aim. Try to stay within 2 to 3 specific aim, which are standalone, which are achievable, and which link back not only to your objective, but the funding agency's objectives. Okay, then meet methodology must meet the objectives. Uh, if you are looking into quantitative, especially from my perspective, those modeling approaches, there are several available. For example, now we have a bandwagon of AI. But then, if you are proposing a specific methodology like neural network or genetic algorithm or some other modeling approaches, ask a question. Could those be easily replaceable or could they offer any advantage over classical statistical approaches or classical modeling approaches? If so, then help understand that these may be the right approaches. For example, I was reviewing a proposal in which they used two scanning procedure in imaging. One was MRI and one was the CAT scanning. And they said that they will use 300 patient data from one and 500 on the other one, and then will use one method to compare them. Immediately you ask, you have a difference in experience. You have 300 case study in one and you have 500 in other, and you are comparing. Even the methodology is efficient, but you are creating a kind of a bias within the data of 300 versus 500. Of course, the data which will be trained on 500 will have a different experience on neural network compared to the one on the other one. So that's the first question come to your mind. Although he may have a different understanding, but from a reviewer perspective, you are picking up a one very glaring difference. So make sure that you have those kind of understanding. Whatever the methodology you're approaching, it has a balanced approach towards your objective. Okay, so coming back to again, you meet that methodology and then carefully review what has already been done. Sometime in our over ambitious effort, we try to propose things which may not work for your given problem because you may have already gone through so much work in that. And also keep in mind, these days everything is available on your fingertips. In a quick manner, you can look into literature, you can compare literature, you can find the duplicate process. So make sure that you have a lot of resources available from the reviewer end, which can look at into your proposed ideas and your proposed objective methodology. Also keep in mind that your review, your literature review should be up to date. And it's very critical that they are given in a right manner, that they are given in a correct manner. Next slide, please. Okay. So once you get your review back, of course, we all get the first shock. It's the same as a coping mechanism, the denial process, the initial thing. How could you do that? So, so go through that. Let your initial shock not stop you. Take a minute when you receive a bad news. Let that sink in for a while. Stop it. Come back after a while. Then take an objective view. Try to understand where the reviewer is coming back. Sometimes they may not be as objective as they should be, but then again, most of the time they are. For example, I give you an example. We were a part of a panel where there were five people, and out of four, five reviewers, four were given consistently between 80 to 90 percentage point to several of those proposals. But one guy, one person was persistently giving in 40s. Everything he gave was either 48, 47, 49. So all of us asked the same question to the administrator to please carefully review that. How come that one person is persistently giving a low score to every proposal? So once you have 3 to 5 reviewer, there's a good possibility that that bias will be removed. So please look into after you have that initial shock taken care of. Try to objectively review, try to revise your proposal based upon, of course, their feedback. Carefully examine that. See if you could, of course, if there's a fundamental rewriting required, then you may want to reconsider that proposal. But if there are some fine tuning required, then you must go through that. And then keep in mind, every time you revise your proposal, it gets finer and finer. And once you fine tune, it may not get funded, but for the next cycle, you have a better option, you have a better chances. Okay. Next slide, please. Now what I did that I tried to again we've been talking this AI thing for last several months on this forum and also university wide how best to use it. So I tried to understand that part. So I asked the AI the same question. And when you look into their answer, it may be very precise, it may be structurally well knitted, and it may be correct, but then it's also, so to speak, lack human emotions. When I look into that, and the next few slides are based upon my AI-based approach, but then if you look into it, does not. I mean, the one good thing I think, the one good point you can continue to relish, so to speak, that AI will not replace human, although it may become very good. But the human emotions, the human experience, which you have gone through over the years, that will not be replaced by AI. So, for example, what I learned over the years by going through this process on my own, that has a built-in understanding of the entire process and give me the confidence. And when I talk to you, I bring that genuine perspective. So the next few slides I will not go through, but as a kind of a pilot, I have prepared. I have got through, I understood, tried to understand, and then prepared slides. So, for example, it asks to a question, how to survive a publishing and turning into a meta science research question. How does the process of surviving affect the product of science? It takes that question and try to build a proposal on that one. For example, going through that repeated rejection. On one hand, you require a very competitive process, and then on the other hand, you are burning out yourself through rejection after rejection. So how well you will go through. So next few slides, I will not take you through, but I have given as a template. It has built that proposal development. Okay, so it's identify problem, propose a way to study it, and offer potential solution. So if you, next slide, please, Dr. Fizita. So it takes you through those 3 phases or 3 or 4 phases and help you build your proposal. I will not go through that. It's for your template if you want to go through that process. But I wanted to bring my personal experience into that equation. And what I again will strongly emphasize that try to understand the process in its holistic approach, not only from the proposal development. Proposal development requires a lot of effort, but it's only one aspect of that total picture. Next, try to understand how the proposals are reviewed and funded. And finally, if you get funded, how successful you may be in managing them, in implementing them. And that requires a managerial experience, which is a good one, but it's a time consuming and frustrating one. I'll stop over here and then use the rest of the time as discussion. But then I have given those slides which will help you as a may work you as a template. Dr. Pujita, could you take them through? Slowly, please. And those are various phases. Then you have executive summary, which help you to go through that, try to build your project abstract, your specific aims. And again, those should align with your objectives. Then you have to understand the background and significance, the so what question, how you build that gap in your understanding. Next slide, please. The innovation. Also keep in mind what's the new thing, smallest them, even the minute one are you bringing to this to the existing body of knowledge. And that's very critical from both objective perspective and also from methodological perspective. So that part should be emphasized wherever it is needed. Next slide, please. Again, if you are like myself on quantitative side, why are you proposing this methodology? Would it bring a new perspective, or would it be as effective or as efficient as existing one? What's the new thing? Next slide, please. Again, then, for example, NIH wanted to know how would you bring that approach of scientific understanding. For example, in USDA asked us farm to fork, and NIH asked us bench to bed. How would you propagate that information? Would you be involving dissemination through only scientific forum or through community engagement? That plan should be very explicit. How are you going to achieve that part? And many funding agencies are putting more emphasis lately on that dissemination process. So how would you achieve that one? Would you be simply going through presentation forums or publication, or would you be involving your students and how well they will be a part of that process? So make sure that you have a clear plan. And of course, we do not talk about the budget. That's a totally different ball game. How well you develop that budget and how well that you implement again using those constraints. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's the post-award challenge I was talking about. Understand the paperwork trail. When it was a shock when I got my first funding independently, and if you do not have administrative assistant available to you, it takes a lot of your time. So be cognizant of that fact. And if you think you can finish a task in 2 months, take 4 months. Take my word, believe me, I have gone through that. And go through now, there are, of course, different kind of portals available. One time we have a travel advancement. I mean, you go through, you got trained, and that was shut down. And then you go again back to the physical way. So it takes a lot of time, and there are at least sometimes 8 to 10 signatures required, and your paperwork is stuck, and that's very frustrating. So if you think you can do it in 2 months, take my word, start 2 months or at least 3 months earlier that. Watch for the again for the data reporting requirements. Before you know, the first year will be gone. And if you are not on top of your requirement, it gets very difficult. You have annual progress report. So make sure the minute you start your project, you have everything in order, you have your database in order, you have start collecting the data required to report, and then you start have a template in place so that by the end of first year you have your progress report ready. And if it's a 3 to 5 years, you keep on building on that till you have final report, which takes a lot of your time. So again, be very organized, be well prepared, understand the process so that you do not have any surprise at the end. And that's your final, of course, piece of work. Could I go to the next one? And that's pretty much it. And if I have my other community over here today, my collaborative community, and if they want to go further on that one as a joint proposal, please 256 just Hall of Science should be your first stop. And then let's see if you could build up a giant proposal. Again, thank you very much for your attention and for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. I don't know if you know the answer to this one. Dr. Ko asked in the chat if you had any idea about EPSCoR competition, the NSF EPSCoR. I know you usually do NIH, so that may not be
We
in your
yeah
realm.
we may not. I was mainly part of NIH or CMI, CDC, and sometimes USDA and some other internal. I've not been part of NSF so far, but I may look on that. But I think other maybe in our department may have a better understanding. So
Mhm.
if you if you reach some of other faculty in biology, those who have gone through the NSF, they may be, or in chemistry also. There are quite a few folks who are, so they might be in a better position than me on EPSCoR.
As you think of questions, there's a lot of information. I really appreciate the last few slides that once we put this on the website and send out links to everyone, they'll have it as kind of a guide, a template for making sure you're hitting all those steps. But my question to you prior to the session that I wanted you to kind of circle back around was when you get those reviews back and you get through the grieving process, right? And you go, okay, now I'm going to try to address it for my next submission. But you start looking at the reviews and you may have two or three reviewers or maybe four sometimes. They conflict. So this reviewer says you need this and this reviewer says you need that. So how do you prioritize those reviews? How do you kind of sort through them to make sure that you're addressing as many as possible, but also kind of acknowledging there's certain things that you can't do two slightly conflicting things at once.
Yeah. It's a challenging question, Dr. Puzeta. Like I mentioned, look into from a bigger perspective, do you think addressing individual reviewer comments will help strength, not only help strength your proposal, but help getting the funding? If it's too broad a change, which you think will totally change the outlook of your project, then I suggest maybe it may not be a good idea to address those. But if you think there are relatively minor issues which staying within your scope could help refine your project, then I think you should. But if your proposal is well developed, if it's not in the first round, if you have already gone through an experience of, then it may not be in that situation. But if you think if you are in the first round and you have a very broad scope, then that problem which you just mentioned might have arisen because you are fishing. What I have learned over the years, when you are fishing too broad, when you are too ambitious, I should not be saying fishing too broad. Initially, we are very ambitious because we are challenged that you have so much stress of getting it funded, that you're trying your best effort, and in doing so, you overreach. So I maybe that may be a cautionary note not to overreach. And if you do not overreach, then chances are that the reviewers will also not be stretching their, I mean, or they may not have that opportunity to overstretch on your proposal because you are well structured. So I'm not sure if I answered that, but that's that's simply I think my understanding over the years.
No, I think that's useful to characterize the review feedback in terms of whether or not it helps you focus your proposal on something doable within the time period and the funding you have available.
One note though, although it may look antagonistic, but most of the reviewer wanted you to get funded though. It's my feeling when I sit through those panel, we always have a very sympathetic perspective of the proposal. First, we acknowledge that we do not have enough time. And if you, even if you have enough time, as a human being, you have constraints. I mean, how much could you spend on it? So you feel a lot of empathy for those people who have gone through this process and yet they have only given 15 to 20 minutes. So we acknowledge, most of the time we do acknowledge that. So one time, especially for the RCMI internal reviewing process, we kept on saying, even if you're rejecting, give them as much feedback as possible and let them know that we have gone through every aspect. Don't get, dejected. go through, look at it from a positive perspective. We just do not want to reject you for the sake of rejection. So again, I mean, a lot of people who go through that, they understand that process, and they have a lot of, if not sympathy, a lot of empathy for the process. So I think from that angle, once you get over your initial shock, look at objectively. Don't get mad at them. They may have a good point for the
Yeah.
refinement.
Yeah. And your point that many of these most of these people who are reviewing have written proposals. They know the amount of effort and time
Yeah.
and thought that goes into them. So they do appreciate it. Um, Another point that you made that I really that resonated with me as an English professor is to think about your reader as a human being and make the product something they can get excited about on that first page. Don't make them have to dig through it to understand how this is transformative or how this is innovative or who this helps. That you want to because as you said, they're sometimes going through quite a few proposals in a very short period of time. Um, so thinking about your reader, thinking about your audience is extremely important. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One take home though, be as simple as possible. It's very difficult, especially in a complex biological or mathematical proposal, that you stay focused and as simplistic as possible. It's not doable, but believe me, when they are reading, they want clarity. They don't want to go through juggling what are you trying to achieve, how are you trying to achieve. So give them that peace of mind that you have this ability. And that's what I learned over the years. That's most of the reviewers are looking. The clarity of idea and the clarity of your approach.
when you guys can unmute if you have questions. I always have questions for everyone, so I will take over the question period if you don't. Um, I was thinking about the getting feedback, internal review, how important that is, um, just to go ahead and get that critical perspective from a colleague.
I totally forgot that. Yes, you brought a very good point. Not only that internal review, but have internal review from two angles. One, those colleagues who are savvy of your subject matter, and one, those who are not. For example, I should send you my proposal to you. You may not understand from the biological perspective, but as a structural English language of
Yeah.
the proposal product, you may give me a very different perspective, which I may have completely overlooked. So please, yeah, have your internal. We used to have all the time asking our colleagues well in advance, but keep in mind you appreciate your time. Don't send them like a three days before the deadline. At least have 3 to 4 weeks and ask them very nicely if they could be kind enough, and at least have two or three maybe different if you could. And that used to be a very critical. Lately, we have not been doing it. We have now so many other help available, but that's a very good point. Believe it or not, I had that in my mind and I completely forgot that point. Thank you for bringing it up.
No, I think it was on one of your slides. You just didn't point it out, but like I said, that's one of the things that I find really useful. And and sometimes, as you say, being outside of the field is useful. I have worked with some of my colleagues in the health sciences and in the sciences over the years and given them feedback. And I can tell when I give it initially, they're like, I don't know, you don't know what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but I'm talking about structure and clarity. And I think of one, she's not here, so I won't say her name, but I could tell she was. I said, just try it. And she tried it and it was so much clearer and she got accepted for publication. It was a not a grant but a publication. So having that outside perspective, as you say, making it very simple for the reader to understand you without having to stop and go, wait, what did they mean? That's really important. Other comments, questions? You want to share your experience? I see several folks on here who have written many grants. So they're just coming to get the real secret sauce, I guess, from Dr. Ahmad, find out what else he knows.
What what else? I mean, don't be super hard on yourself. appreciate even small achievements. Sometimes, as a faculty, we tend to be very hard on ourselves, always looking for a multi-million dollar grant. But I also never shied away even getting 5,000 or 15,000 or even 25. I had several small grants. I had several major grants too. But do not shy away even getting a $5,000 grant. Sometimes it may look like not, but please don't. And then appreciate yourself even on a very minor achievement. Sometimes we tend to forget that. You've been doing a lot. For example, several aspects of my requirement are it's taking a lot of undergraduate advisement takes a lot of time. Then teaching takes a lot of time. Then service takes a lot of time. On top of that, if you stay motivated to keep on writing grants and keep on rejecting and writing again, appreciate yourself, believe it or not. So sometime take some time to say hello to yourself and then do a favor to yourself, which most of the time we forget that.
Yep. I
And
think so, yeah, staying motivated, staying positive. And those small grants are actually an important part of building your record. If you can't go from having, well, you can, but it helps when you go for that big grant to say, okay, I've had these $50,000 grants. Now I'm asking for, 800,000, but I've successfully done these other grants. So it helps them see that you know what the process looks like. It doesn't hurt anyway.
although the administrators they hate the small grants. I mean, whenever you look into the tower, they said there's no difference between a grant which is $1 million and a grant which is $10,000. They have to do the same amount of paperwork. We understand from their side, but again, if you have an opportunity, for example, Mississippi Inbray, at one time $25,000 from them was relatively an easy gig. So do not miss that. And then one time I also have through NASA, I think 25 to 50,000 for several
Mhm.
years. So wherever you get chance, of course, and then it also gives your student an opportunity, especially at
Yes.
undergrad level, if you could involve them, and that builds a lot of your reputation, a lot of your portfolio, uh, and then gives you maybe a different perspective. Although again, over the point which you have to be careful is the time constraints because you have so many parallel challenging events going on. So you have to maintain that, especially during your early part of your career. As you proceed, it gets relatively easier because of your experience. But in the beginning, it's very daunting.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate everyone for joining us on this Friday morning. I know that we have the hope that our university will continue to grow in its grant award production because it helps us help our students and it helps us support the things that we're interested in our disciplines and our research. Um, I'm going to volunteer Dr. Ahmad to answer your emails after this. If you if you think of a question later, Dr. Ahmad did not
Please,
stop
sure, sure.
this
Please,
beforehand.
I'll be
But
more than glad. Yeah, send me an email, please. Please.
yeah.
Appreciate it again. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all for being here. We will have the recording and the slides available on the JSU Faculty Development website by Monday. That's JSU edu/scholars. So thank you again, and we hope to see you next week for our next Friday session. Bye, everyone.
Bye.